And she goes, Abby, I don't want to do this no more. I don't want to get married.
No love, no choice.
Something's not right here.
This illegal forced marriage
Is an insidious crime.
robbed a young woman of her freedom
Their loveless marriage exploded in violence.
and her life.
She had to face the impossible choice of her family or the man she didn't want to marry.
Yes.
That's next on 60 Minutes.
Ruqayyah Haidari lived with a conflict she couldn't resolve. She was torn between two worlds. On one hand, there were the strict but important customs of her Afghan heritage. On the other, the freedoms that life in Australia promised. Her friends said the 20-year-old longed to be a modern woman, but at home, she couldn't bring herself to disappoint her mother. Sakina Jan had an entirely different plan for her daughter's future. She told Ruqayyah she was to marry a man she barely knew. Love didn't factor into the equation. It was a forced marriage. It was illegal, and it ended disastrously. It's November 2019, and in a hall in country Victoria, 500 guests are celebrating a marriage. This is an Afghan wedding steeped in tradition and ritual. The bride is 20-year-old Ruqayyah Haidari, but this is not a happy occasion. She doesn't love the groom. She barely knows him. She's been forced into this by her mother, and she doesn't want to let her down.
Ruqayyah was an outgoing, bubbly, wanted to live life person. She never wanted to hold anything back. She was just, you know, if she had her mindset to it, she'd do it. Like, she wanted to be a nurse, she wanted to do her beauty, she wanted to get her big house. Like, she wanted to do all them things that normal people do in life.
Like most young women, Ruqayyah had big plans for her future. And according to her friend Abby Gawn, she felt anything was possible, having fled war-torn Afghanistan with her family years earlier.
Her hopes and dreams were to just be happy and be free.
Did she think that she could achieve that?
Yes. Yep.
And that all got snatched away from her?
Yep. It did.
Tragically, this story doesn't end well. Just 6 weeks after this video was taken, Ruqayyah was dead, murdered by the monster she'd exchanged rings with. But husband Muhammad Ali Halimi isn't the only villain. In the eyes of the law, Ruqayyah's mother, Sakina Jan, is also a criminal, after becoming the first person in Australia to be convicted of causing a person to enter a forced marriage.
What has this done to your family?
Well, a lot of stress, a lot of pressure.
A lot of heartache?
Heartaches, you know, it's pain in the heart, you know, to be honest. It's pain in the heart.
Like his sister, Taki Haidari thought coming to Australia would be the start of a new life. Instead, his family has been broken by tragedy.
I'm trying to focus on the work. I'm trying to focus, you know, my job, but I just can't stop thinking about it.
When the family arrived in Australia, they called Shepparton in northern Victoria home. It's a world away from Afghanistan, but Ruqayyah settled in easily. Life was good until near the end of her final year at school, when she was told she was about to become a bride. It wasn't what Ruqayyah wanted. Abby Gawn instantly felt her friend's grief.
She used to come to school and just not be herself. And then that's when I kind of knew, nah, something's not right here. Like, we were just smiling and having a laugh yesterday, and now you're down in the dumps. Mm. I said, what is wrong? And she goes, Abby, I don't want to do this no more. I said, do what? Like, what do you want to do? She goes, Abby, I don't want to get married.
Ruqayyah had only met 25-year-old Muhammad Ali Halimi a few times. He was an Uber driver and factory worker from Perth who'd been introduced to the family by a member of Shepparton's Afghan community.
What did she actually say about the marriage?
didn't feel comfortable with doing it. She wasn't ready. She wasn't happy. Like, that's the voice I hear in my head every day. Abby, I don't want to do it.
We now know Rukia also spoke to other friends and teachers at school about her impending wedding, and that they were so concerned they contacted the Australian Federal Police. In August 2019, 2 officers spent nearly 4 hours speaking with Rukia about her situation and offered her a range of support. In their minds, there was no doubt she was at risk of being a victim of forced marriage, a complex and underreported crime.
There are grave risks associated with forced marriage, and the consequences can be terrible.
Would you call this a bit of a hidden issue in Australia, forced marriage?
I think it's definitely a crime that a lot of Australians might think doesn't exist here.
As Commander of Human Exploitation at the Australian Federal Police, Helen Schneider has a tough job. It's especially so when dealing with cases of forced marriage. Most Australians are not aware of it, or if they are, get it confused with the much more common practice of arranged marriage.
What is the difference between a forced marriage and an arranged marriage?
Well, by law here in Australia, we define a forced marriage as someone who's married someone without their full or free consent. And that's because either threats, coercion or deception is involved, or because they're not able to understand the full nature and effect of that marriage ceremony.
In Australia, in the past 10 years, there have been more than 500 reports of forced marriage, 90 in the past year alone. But the AFP faces enormous difficulties in investigating it, largely because of the reluctance of victims to implicate their families in wrongdoing.
What we find in this crime type, unfortunately, is the majority of our victims are young women and young girls, and that the majority of the perpetrators in these instances are people that are known to them or related to them, such as parents, relatives or community members. So that can actually make them quite unwilling, these victims, to enter into an investigation process.
Rukia Hadari faced an impossible choice. If she got help from the AFP, she knew she'd be betraying her mother. It was a situation made more complicated because, as her brother recalls, there were no concerns about the groom.
What were your impressions of this man?
The way he was behaving, the way he was talking. He was the way his personality was. I thought he was a good man.
So good, in fact, Taki was untroubled when, the day after the wedding, Rukia moved to Perth with her new husband. But it's now clear his sister was deeply worried. As she left Shepparton, she sent this Snapchat video to her friends. From that point on, there was little communication with those back home.
At what point did you realise there may be problems with the marriage?
When she said, try not to contact me again. And I felt worried about it so much. I was always thinking about her, like, what's going on, what's the matter?
The first weeks of any marriage should be a picture of domestic bliss. But for Rukia, it was not the beginning of happily ever after. Her new husband quickly turned, extraordinarily recording this video highlighting the supposed failures of his bride. He complained Rukia wasn't cooking or cleaning for him, and to humiliate his wife even more, he sent the vision to her family back in Shepparton.
I was so worried and very nervous, and stressed, like what's going on, what's actually happening.
Increasingly anxious, Taki tried calling his sister, but she didn't answer, so he phoned Halimi instead. What happened next has haunted him ever since.
The only thing he said was, like, it's none of your business. It's my life, you mind your own business. And then he got mad at me and he started swearing, yelling, screaming over the phone. And I heard from back, I heard that she just woke up. That she was saying, like, who are you talking to? Who are you swearing at?
You could hear Rukia in the background.
Yes. And then he started swearing at her, and he hung up the phone. I was so worried, I freaked out. And after that, after 10 minutes, I had a call from Halimi. He says, "Come and get your sister's dead body. I'm going to the police station." And he hung up.
With her brother on the other end of the phone, thousands of kilometres away, Ruqayyah Haidari lay bleeding to death on the kitchen floor of her new home. But there was never any doubt about who was responsible. After slitting his young wife's throat, Halimi drove himself to a police station.
A young woman robbed of her freedom and then her life.
Halimi told the police that he snapped after a long period of rejection, emotional heartache and confusion. He said when he asked Ruqayyah why she'd married him, she said her parents had pushed her. But that's not how Taki remembers it.
Did Ruqayyah at any point tell you or anyone else in your family that she didn't want to marry Mohammed Halimi?
At any point, no.
The AFP, though, saw it differently. While Halimi was convicted of murder and jailed for at least 19 years, he wasn't the person detectives were focused on. As you'll see, their target was someone much closer to Ruqayyah. Young, beautiful and sitting next to her new husband, this should have been the beginning of a fairy tale for Ruqayyah Haidari. But to watch her wedding video is to watch a crime unfold. Because this was a marriage she was forced into, and 6 weeks later, she was dead, her throat slashed by her new husband, a man she barely knew.
Look, it's a really heartbreaking outcome, that particular matter, and clearly we know that, there are grave risks associated with forced marriage.
The person responsible for forcing Ruqayyah into the marriage was her own mother, Sakina Mohammed Jan. Last month, after a 2-week trial in Victoria's County Court, she became the first person in Australia to be convicted of the crime. Australian Federal Police Commander Helen Schneider now leads the team who investigated the case.
It's important to send deterrence messaging through court processes.
What is the main aim of the AFP? Is it prevention? Is it intervention? Is it prosecution?
The AFP really sees prevention, disruption, investigation as equally successful strategies, but these must be managed in parallel with the support and protection of victims, whatever pathway we take there, whatever our area of focus is.
It's a delicate balance for officers, because while the law is black and white, the circumstances surrounding a forced marriage rarely are.
And I think with that case, the very thing that she didn't want, which was her mother experiencing, the criminal justice system, is the very thing that has happened.
It's an unusual area of expertise, but Dr. Laura Vidal has dedicated her career to preventing forced marriage. A lecturer and researcher at the University of Canberra, she spent more than a decade talking to victims about their experiences.
This really is a tragedy, isn't it? I mean, we're talking about a young woman who's been murdered by a monster and whose mother now faces jail time.
And we have to think really critically about what it means for this conviction to be considered a success in the realm of preventing or addressing forced marriage.
What concerns Dr. Vidal is the chance that the conviction of Ruqayyah's mother could in fact do more to isolate victims.
The most common thing that is said to me is, I don't want anybody to get in trouble, I just don't want to get married. And so the likelihood that this kind of conviction is going to mean that people are even more reticent to come forward and are more hesitant to seek support, because what they see as seeking support leads to these kinds of outcomes.
So you see this conviction as a potential deterrent to future victims?
It has that potential, yes.
Do you concede that it is a legitimate concern?
It's a concern that anyone has in any situation where a loved one might be prosecuted. But equally, we're concerned here to prevent forced marriage. We're concerned here to provide safe pathways for people who wish to report it.
Attorney General Mark Dreyfus criminalised forced marriage in 2013. But this year, he made several changes to the way victims can seek support.
An alternative referral pathway, so that instead of going to the Australian Federal Police, people who wish to report that they think someone is in a forced marriage situation or a victim of a forced marriage will be able to go to that alternative rather than going only to the police.
He's so concerned about the issue, he's committed $50 million to addressing it.
We don't want to see anyone coerced or tricked or forced in any way into a marriage that they are not consenting to freely and willingly.
Is the system working as it stands, do you think?
It's never going to be possible for us to say comprehensively, categorically, that it's working. The fact that we continue to get a steady stream of reports tells us that there are continuing attempts to force some people in our community into marriage. I think we're doing a great deal. We know we've got more to do. We're intent on continuing to do more.
In many ways, Ruqayyah Haidari's voice has been the loudest in her death. It's little comfort for those who knew her, but the hope is her story encourages other victims to seek help.
I have no doubt it is challenging for people to come forward to law enforcement. It might be embarrassing. They might not want to get anyone in trouble that they know. I understand all of that. I know how hard it is for them to come forward, but I guess all I can do is really just assure them that there is, so many avenues available to how we can help them, and we are going to be listening to what they need.
If this story has raised issues and you need to speak with someone, help is available. Call 1-800-RESPECT, which is 1-800-737-732.
Hello, I'm Amelia Adams. Thanks for watching 60 Minutes Australia. Subscribe to our channel now for brand new stories and exclusive clips every week. And don't miss out on our extra minute segments and full episodes of 60 Minutes on 9now.com.au and the 9Now app.